Tonight, the family at the centre of the Billy Gordon scandal speaks out.
Police bust a hydroponic drug lab.
A traffic officer's near miss.
And the keys to the city cut for the Cowboys.
Across Cairns and far north Queensland, this is 7 Local News with Rob Bruff and Joanne Desmond.
Good evening, thanks for joining us.
Good evening.
Locals are warning of widespread protests across Cape York if controversial MP Billy Gordon goes ahead. Tonight, a landmark decision for Adani's Carmichael mine.
Clive Palmer shuts down concerns over job cuts.
A warning to the North's at-risk communities.
And a crash victim's heartwarming thanks to his rescue.
Across Townsville and North Queensland, this is 7 Local News with Rob Bruff and Joanne Desmond.
Good evening, thanks for joining us.
Good evening.
Well, the federal government has approved Adani's Carmichael coal project again, subject to 36 of the strictest conditions in Australian history.
Tonight, a man accused of murdering a Moranbah toddler. Police seize thousands of dollars worth of drugs. Cane farmers fight for a cut in power prices. And adventurers leave to tackle Mount Everest.
Across Mackay, the Whitsundays and the coalfields, this is 7 Local News with Rob Bruff.
Good evening. Thanks very much for joining us. A 29-year-old man has faced Mackay Magistrates Court accused of murdering an 18-month-old boy at a Moranbah home.
Tonight, fury outside court after a hit-and-run sentence.
The Carmichael mine gets federal approval again.
Commercial fishers gutted as net-free zones move ahead.
And a young CQ patient celebrates a milestone.
Serving Central Queensland, this is 7 Local News with Rob Bruff and Joanne Desmond.
Good evening, thanks for joining us.
Good evening.
Well, there's been chaos outside a Rockhampton court as supporters of a teenage hit-run victim erupted in anger over the driver's sentencing.
Tonight, storms smashed parts of the Wide Bay. 2 heroes save an elderly woman's life. More allegations of school discipline scandals and tickets to go on sale for the NRL trial.
Across the Wide Bay Burnett, this is 7 Local News with Rob Bruff.
Good evening. Thanks very much for joining us. Homeowners and businesses are assessing the damage after a superstorm cell battered the region overnight. Tonight, a call to make streets safer doesn't go to plan. Ice and fraud offences cause a jump in the crime rate. Coloured collars to identify our dangerous dogs. And fitness fanatics keep a tourism boom in shape.
Live from the Sunshine Coast, this is 7 Local News with Rob Bruff.
Good evening, folks. Thanks very much for joining us. The Attorney-General has announced a review of how the state's judges and magistrates are appointed.
Tonight, exclusive pictures of the new Grand Central.
Bold plans how you can own a share in a cannery.
The Q fever fears for Wellcamp residents.
And the runaway that made a right galah of himself.
Serving the Darling Downs and beyond, this is 7 Local News with Rob Bruff and Joanne Desmond.
Good evening, folks. Thanks very much for joining us.
Good evening.
And welcome to our first edition of 7 Local News covering the Darling Downs and beyond. Thanks very much for your company.
Tonight, it's on again. The North Coast bracing for more flooding, rains and storms. Hope among the ruins after a little boy is pulled from the rubble in Nepal. The wrong answer that led to this petrol station attack. And Jared Haynes studying hard to learn all the NFL plays at the 49ers training.
This is Prime7 News at 6:30 with Daniel Gibson.
Good evening. Exhausted SES volunteers are now heading back to the state's north, where residents are preparing for more damaging wild weather over the next few days.
In Prime7 News, a 20-year-old man is in an induced coma after being bitten by a shark at Ballina. Patrons and staff threatened at a North Coast bowling club by thieves armed with knives. Lest we forget, crowds gather to pay their respects this Remembrance Day.
And rain and storms are expected to return later in the week. I've got all the details for you soon. Don't go away.
This is Prime7 News at 6 with Madeleine Collignon.
Good evening. A 20-year-old man is in an induced coma after being attacked by a shark at Ballina. Tonight, a step back in time at a special Remembrance Day service in Barraba. Uralla becomes a meat in the sandwich as neighbours consider merging options. The clock stops in Manila as the town's timepiece awaits specialist repairs.
And we could see a few thunderstorms return to the radars over the next couple of days. I'll have the details for you soon.
This is Prime7 News at 6 with Madeleine Collignon.
Good evening. History has repeated itself today as hundreds gathered in Barraba to mark the end of World War I.
Tonight, the road toll still rising as another young life is taken in a terrifying crash. Locals unite to spare a thought for the men and women who died in war. Fire destroys a high-performance sports sedan as the owner looks on.
And it'll remain unsettled tomorrow, but will the sunshine return in time for the weekend? Details shortly.
This is Prime7 News at 6 with Freya Cole.
Good evening. Police have arrested 2 women in Wellington who were found with prohibited drugs and stolen possessions. Tonight, discontent boils over as a controversial trots track gets a go-ahead. Solemn Remembrance Day scenes as the region pauses to honour those who fell. One of our most spectacular gardens thrown open for a good cause.
And it'll remain unsettled tomorrow, but will the sunshine return in time for the weekend? Details shortly.
This is Prime7 News at 6 with Freya Cole.
Good evening. There were angry scenes this afternoon when a planning panel approved a controversial harness racing track for North Wagga. Tonight, a truck mishap leaves businesses without power just when they needed it most. Solemn Remembrance Day scenes as the region pauses to honour those who fell. Akka away, the outspoken North Albury coach bound for the Bombers.
And it'll remain unsettled tomorrow, but will the sunshine return in time for the weekend? Details shortly.
This is Prime7 News at 6 with Freya Cole.
Good evening. Wodonga's CBD was blacked out this morning when power was cut for the second time in a week.
Tonight, no jail. A footy fan walks free after an angry attack on an umpire.
I'm sorry for what I did.
Teacher faces court charged with indecently dealing with her student for a year. And town smashed, hail breaks a record dry spell. Now get ready for flash flooding.
Live across Western Australia, GWN7 News with Noel Brunning.
Good evening. First tonight, a man who punched an umpire at a country football grand final has narrowly avoided jail time.
Tonight, Cadbury to close its iconic Hobart Visitor Centre. A new partnership reinforcing Tasmania as the Antarctic gateway. Russia launches airstrikes in Syria with questions over its targets. Faster internet on the way for remote parts of Australia. And the Eagles rocked following drug allegations by Daniel Chick.
This is Southern Cross News with Joe Palmer.
Good evening, everyone. A Tasmanian tourism icon will close its doors by Christmas, leaving more local Cadbury workers without a job in the latest company shake-up.
Tonight, the Greens push to keep out nuclear, saying renewables are the future for our region. And a debate over insurance slows plans to fix up the birthplace of Australia's union movement.
This is Southern Cross News with Tim Hatfield.
Good evening, but first tonight, fire danger season has officially begun right across 12 districts of the state. 2 fires were sparked on the weekend on the outskirts of Port Pirie already, and now the CFS says it's time to be bushfire prepared.